All right, so the way, there's a couple ways to handle it, but the way I showed you yesterday was to write it in as a function. But then again, like that might be a little overkill. This technique that I'm going to show you actually allows you to manipulate the values as needed. So if I needed to multiply all the values by 2 or divide them by whatever, I can use this technique. That's going to come into play. It's going to be a nifty technique when we get into Taylor and Maclaurin polynomials. Right? So hit stat. So not second stat like we were doing yesterday, just hit stat and then edit. All right, I have some data in there from something, doesn't matter what it is. So if you don't have much experience with the stat editor, if you haven't taken a stat class, that might be the case. What you want to do, if you ever want to clear out a column, go up to the column heading, hit clear. I cannot keep this thing still. And then hit enter. Hit clear and then enter. So up to the column heading, hit clear and enter. If you ever hit delete on a column heading, it'll wipe out the entire column. It's easy enough to get back, but it's not something you want to deal with. All right, so what I want to do is I want to put in this particular sequence of values. All right, there's a couple ways to do it, but the easiest way to do it would be to use the sequence function, which we talked about yesterday. So go up to the column heading L1 and hit enter, and then hit second stat ops 5. All right. Everything I said yesterday is true. It's the expression, the variable, the start, and the stop. Oh, I shouldn't have erased that. So expression, variable, start, stop. So that's if you're a TI-83 person. All right, we got a pretty beefy expression here. So I'm going to start typing it in. -1 raised to the x power. So your math print doesn't work in this wizard. Right? Everything is kind of on the line in the field. So you have to deal with things like the caret symbol, regardless of whether you have the fancy calculator or this one. All right, so, or at least I think. So we have that. Then we're going to multiply this by 4x minus 1 divided by x minus 6. You could use n's if you want, because the next step in the process is to tell the calculator what variable you're using. So if you're using n, just type in n for the variable. Yeah. So you just want to make sure your order of operations are correct. So parentheses around each part of your fraction when you're in this form, because there's no, like the fraction editor doesn't work the same way here. All right. Powers are going to happen before multiplication, so the -1 when it's raised to the x power, that's going to happen before all the other stuff, so we're good there. All right. So x, I'm going to say the first 4 values. So start at 1, end at 4, and go to paste. And then hit enter. And then it'll populate your list with those values. All right. So if I needed to find the sum, there's a sum function I could apply to this list. But again, just like if you have any experience with stats, if you were finding something like the standard deviation, sometimes you want to multiply an entire column of data by a number, or subtract an entire column of data, subtract a number from an entire column of data, things like that. You could do that if it's in list form, right? So these would be the first bunch of entries. Now it's not in fraction form, but really, I mean, I don't think that matters. Okay. First off, these are easily identifiable fractions, and secondly, it didn't stipulate one way or another which way the answer should be represented. All right. So benefit of this approach, you know, like the first 4 entries, no. The first 20 entries, the first 30 entries, yeah, things like that, right? And also, if you're looking for a pattern, it's easier to identify when it's in a list than it is if you have to kind of figure out all the entries individually. Right? So, another strategy.